Hey everyone, how's it going? Juan Dhas here, and welcome to this week's lesson video, which is going to be a part of the perspective series I occasionally do on this channel, where I tackle some topics that are maybe a little more abstract or esoteric and kind of hard to understand, and invite a conversation around the topic we're talking about, and hopefully maybe give a little more insight into sometimes what can be considered very conceptual and tough to understand, but I think are topics that really do need to be addressed at some point in music education or just learning about music or, performing and writing. And namely, we're going to be talking about writing in this week's video. I was looking through my old videos, topics, and trying to find inspiration for topics. And I came across the melodicism and improv video, and in that video I hinted at a topic I wanted to talk about, which was composition. Specifically getting past some mental blocks in composition, stuff that, sometimes we're in our own heads and we don't allow ourselves to, write or actually put something out into the world. I think this could be a really valuable thing to talk about, and bear with me, this is going to be pretty stream of consciousness and off the cuff, so grab a coffee, grab a drink, get comfortable, and yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. Now, I wanted to talk about this specifically because I see it in my composition students, or sometimes I have students that want to focus a little more on composition than on the playing side of things, even though they want to do both. And in poking and prodding, I usually find that the issue lies in getting started or getting an idea down and expanding it further, or trying to fight that inner critic that I think many of us struggle with, especially in the jazz or creative sphere. That said, just to kind of preface this, I do think that this could be valuable for anyone, and now that I think about it, it could be valuable for fields outside of music. So if something comes to mind, maybe how this can help you get past a certain block, please leave it in the comments. But I do think this is valuable also, not just for composition or, things outside of music, just life in general, but even maybe taking a similar perspective on why you may not want, and trying to figure out why you haven't tackled that solo you want to transcribe, why you haven't tackled that tune yet, why you're still a little afraid of trying to learn a new tune even though you know that tune might benefit you or teach you something. So to give a bit of background, composition is something I've always been interested in ever since I was little. I was introduced to music through the great composers, through Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, eventually Brahms, Schubert, Chopin, Rachmaninoff, and I had classical piano training for a while, so even though I don't admittedly play much these days, that is kind of my root and my foundation. And even when I started to take music a lot more seriously and consider it as a career, I knew that composition was something I wanted to focus on, and I wanted that to be part of what my career is. And in essence, I think I'm very lucky and fortunate to be able to do that. People find me through my music, through the music I've put out, and people who follow me on social media probably see that I'm putting snippets out, or just recently I put out a demo, which probably may be sounding somewhere in the back of this video if I decide to put it in. And where was I going with this? Oh, right, demos. Yeah, they see demos, or they see that, okay, I've shared the little scratch sheet I always do for every composition. And I'll talk about that a bit because it's pertinent to the process. I want to also give an exercise that was given to me by one of my mentors, Tim Miller, and to help you out with this. So, fast forward, this probably explains why I also went to Berklee, not only just to improve as a guitar player and as a musician, but I did want to learn how to compose, and I actually was a writing major for a short while. I did contemporary writing and production and performance. I ended up graduating as just a performance major though, and dropped my second major because I was focused more on my own personal composition and playing guitar and just getting better and playing with people and improving as a musician. So, that said, when I got to Berklee, or rather, right up until maybe halfway through Berklee, I wasn't much of a composer, even if I wanted to write. I would always run into problems, and no fault of Berklee or anything. Actually, there was no shortage of inspiration. Great musicians to play with all the time. I could have gone and taken studio time or booked studio time and recorded these, which in hindsight I should have taken advantage of more, but I think I ended up working past that block in a very natural way. That now it doesn't really bother me. If anything, my natural instinct is nowadays is if I have a composition, I want to record it, or I want to find a way to put it together. But I always struggled at some point or another, unless there was a deadline and, you had to hand in a composition for a harmony project and you just had to make sure it fulfilled the requirements or the criteria. That said, I would always write and hit a roadblock, and that roadblock would usually be something along the lines of, I don't know what comes after this section, I don't know, I can't write a good B section, this melody seems incomplete, but I don't know what to do, I can't hear the instrumentation. I'm sure many of you can relate. Many of you can relate to having some sort of block in mind that acts as the excuse for not finishing it, and I'm going to label it as such, as an excuse, because it's a self-imposed limitation on why we can't finish this idea. So much so that I think this probably explains why I decided to, absorb so much information, because I think, okay, maybe it's something to do with my technique. Maybe I just don't know enough harmony. Maybe I still don't understand my harmonic concepts. Maybe I don't have compositional technique. So I would absorb information and trying to figure out this problem, and still kind of end up hitting that wall. And I think the problem is very simple and very complex at the same time. Fast forward a couple semesters, I think it was like around my 5th or 6th semester at Berklee. Yes, the Berklee people watching might be very familiar with how we refer to everything as semesters as opposed to freshman year or sophomore year. Anyway, besides the point. Getting into my lessons with Tim Miller, I've always been someone to kind of plan ahead and think to some degree or another, and was thinking, okay, what do I do after Berklee? Kind of triggered a bit of an existential crisis, but you start thinking about this, and one of Tim's recommendations was to put out a record, and I was kind of hesitant, thinking, maybe I should put out a single, maybe I should put out an EP, but Tim really gave me that push of going, no, put out a full record and release it. Have something that is your own. And for the record, a lot of this guidance, I really give full credit to Tim Miller, because I wouldn't have been able to work past a lot of this otherwise. And I think if it weren't for Tim, maybe it would have taken me much longer to work through that mental block, and kind of having someone push you and hold you accountable for that is really valuable. So, came up, the composition was something I wanted to do, but I was always stuck, and through some investigating, Tim figured out exactly why. And maybe on a subconscious level, I understood why already. I just didn't want to really acknowledge it. Or didn't know how to acknowledge it, should I say. And to essentially paraphrase, Tim established and I think many can relate to this, through perfectionistic tendencies and just incredibly high standards, and I'm going to poke fun at this in a way, we set this grand vision for ourselves. We start with the germ of an idea, and we're so excited by this idea that we anticipate what it could be further down the line, when we haven't really even started the piece yet. And as such, because we have this vision of what it could be, this may not apply to some of you, but we always start comparing what we write to this internal vision, even if the vision isn't clear. So as such, we compare it and then we go, no, that's not good enough. Sound familiar? We write another section or another melody and we see how it fits with the last one. It's like, it's still not good enough. And so on and so forth. And then you just get frustrated and shelve the composition, never to look at it again. So, admittedly, it's rather accurate, at least it was in my case. And it's like, okay, let's work on it. And Tim gave me the strategy. I'm going to give it to you guys because it really helped me, and I just want to share something that actually got me started. And just to illustrate my point, in that lesson we put together a tune with just some gentle guidance, nothing directed, just gentle, like, hey, what if you tried this? Finished it in about 20 minutes. And then Tim gave me an assignment of, okay, you have to compose 3 tunes for next week. I don't care what it is, you have to bring me 3 tunes. I brought those 3 tunes. That led to another thing. I applied the same method to another class where the idea was come in with 2 compositions and those will be your graded portions for the semester. And all of these compositions resulted in my first album, Embracing Clarity. So just to illustrate my point, I went from kind of being in a paralyzed state and not really knowing how to write a tune or how to put it together, or not allowing myself to put it together, to releasing an album of music within the span of about a year. And that's quite fast. Now that I look at it in retrospect, that's quite quick. Sometimes these issues can take a long time to resolve. So, to dive in, and feel free to note down the process and take notes. What Tim affectionately referred to this as writing for the trash can. For my friends who are maybe a little more derivative of the Queen's English, writing for the garbage bin, yes, I went to a British school in Dubai. Those are my roots. So, nice. So, consider that the idea of writing for the trash can is essentially, to put it in a neat little package, writing without expectations. And this is crucial. This is rule number 1. You are not allowed to impose a grand vision for this thing. You are just going to write in a stream of consciousness manner. And what this is to get you used to the fact that this composition may not be any good, and it could be good, or it could be, but the reality is you just want to write freely without imposing something or projecting something onto this tune. In a way, it's allowing you to just write for what the tune wants to be, rather than being in your own head. For this reason, I actually recommend people get staff paper and go with this process here, because, pardon me for getting a little esoteric, it allows it, even though it's not permanent, you feel a bit more of a sense of, okay, this has now been put onto a page, let's keep going. I can't change it. If you were to do this in Finale, it requires a little, or Sibelius or whatever, requires a little bit of extra discipline in not wanting to change anything and fighting the urge of editing. Which leads me to rule number 2. Throughout the process, you are not allowed to edit. You are not allowed to go and change anything. What you see is done. If you want to edit things, you can do so after you've finished the exercise. And this exercise can actually be quite quick. It can take a small practice session of like 20 minutes, 30 minutes. You can set yourself a timer if that helps. So step 1 is you start with a chord and you sing a few notes on top of it. Now, many people might have seen some of the sketches I've shared over time if you follow me on Instagram, and eventually what they turn into. And this is kind of the process I've used over time because it just ended up feeling quite natural to me. Take a chord and sing a few notes on top of this chord. Write the chord symbol and write the notes without any rhythm. This is crucial. I find that if you've seen to summarize, if you see kind of the charts that I write, or the little scratch sheets I write, it ends up being this process of what you see is chord symbols notation that is somewhat of a melody and bar lines that don't denote time signature or rhythm, they denote phrasing. They indicate, okay, this is kind of where I want the phrase to end or transition to the next chord. That's the only meaning. I find that way I'm not thinking of a rhythmic feel, I'm not locking myself into anything. And in truth, if a composition, and this is kind of getting more into like compositional technique, if the tune can stand on its own with harmony and melody, you know you've kind of got a good tune on your hands. But again, in keeping with the flow of what we're talking about, don't ascribe whether it's good or bad to this. So, you start with a chord, you write a melody, and then you move to the next one. Without much thought, you want to limit the amount of internal chatter, if you would. Put a bar line, write the next chord, sing another few notes of that melody, doesn't matter what they are, write down the notes of the melody without any rhythm, and keep going. Whatever it feels like. If it's a long note, just write one note. If there are several notes for this one chord, write that down. Don't worry about the phrasing yet. Keep going until you've reached an end point, until you feel like, okay, I'm done. Or if you're doing this with a timer, when the timer goes off, that's it, you're done. And this is where it gets a little, again, esoteric or bizarre or whatever. Write a title for the tune, has to be the first thing that comes to mind. Don't think about it too much, and sign your name at the bottom. This has nothing to do with ego, rather it's telling yourself, okay, this tune, for whatever it is, better or worse, now exists in the world. And this tune has a title, and you've signed your name on the bottom, so there, deal with it. And the reason why this exercise is called writing for the garbage, or writing for the bin, or the trash can, whatever name you want to ascribe to it, the reason for this is to get you used to putting something out into the world, and rather putting it into existence, if you would. And because you're writing without expectations, again, you're imagining that no matter what you write, it's going to end up in the bin anyway, whether it's good or bad. Theoretically speaking. Don't actually throw it in the bin. Unless you really think it's that bad, then yeah, go ahead. But the point is, you're imagining that this is going to end up in the bin regardless, and it kind of frees you up from those expectations. So after you're done, play through the tune, and you might find something interesting. You might find that in most cases, it's probably better than you thought it was. It's probably more interesting than you thought it was. It's kind of similar to that idea that's been floating around a little while, I've seen on YouTube, or just in general for music and composition and songwriting. Write a bad song. It's actually quite difficult to do. Give it a go. Try write a really bad song. It's very difficult. So, in doing so, you may realize that it's better than you think. If it's not, okay, no big deal. Try it with another one. Best case scenario, you end up with a full tune in probably a much quicker time. Now, bear in mind, okay, you need to do some arranging later, and maybe as you're going through the process, you might edit things after the fact. But in the process of putting everything down on the page, you're not really criticizing what you're putting down. And that's important. So, and as I said, you free yourself from that expectation and of yourself more than anything else. So, you might find it's actually better than you think. You may end up with a full tune. At worst, it's not great, but chances are, at the very least, you will find a nugget. Now that nugget may not mean something. It could be the catalyst for a new tune. It's great. Or it could be something you keep away for later. And as you do this exercise more, you might have a collection of little vignettes, and then you realize, hang on, this sounds like a B section, and this one sounds like an A section. What if I put them together? And then you have a tune. The point is, and I want to wrap this up just about now, the point of this exercise is to get yourself out of your own head And from here on out, yes, I would like to discuss more about composition, and maybe I might go through my own process and go through like maybe stuff about compositional technique, or maybe talk about like some conceptual stuff. But I think I had to address, I feel like I had to address this topic first, because this is usually the hardest step for most people. Most people don't have problems with coming up with ideas. Most people have problem executing on their ideas, or having the confidence to say, or kind of the confidence of silencing that internal chatter, or just switching it off for a minute and just letting the idea flow out into the world. So I hope this was interesting for you guys. Please, if you do enjoy this stuff, subscribe to the channel. Please check out some of the other lessons I've uploaded. And if you can, hit the notification bell so you do get notifications about when I upload, even though I upload on a weekly basis. I'm sorry this was a little late. We had some renovation happening in the building, so it made it a little difficult to record. As always, if you have any questions, if you have any topics to suggest, please do leave it in the comments. I do read them. I read all the comments, and I note down any lesson topics for future videos. So, take care, and I hope to see you in the next video.